I never expected the night to end with my boss asleep on my couch, snoring softly, one shoe still on. But there he was slumped against the throw pillow I bought from Target last fall, his tie loosened, the last of his pride dissolving into a quiet sigh. It wasn't the first time I saw him like this, vulnerable in a way most people never get to witness. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way his fingers brushed my arm when I helped him up the stairs. Or the fact that I didn't pull away. We'd known each other for over a year. Long enough to blur the lines between professional and personal, but not long enough for me to be stupid about it. He was my supervisor. Older than me by at least 7 or 8 years. Confident in a way I wasn't, sharp, assertive, respected, and devastatingly attractive. I was the kind of guy who wore hoodies to the office on Fridays and kept a snack drawer filled with trail mix and discount chocolates. He wore cufflinks and remembered everyone's names, even the interns. Our desks weren't even on the same floor. But ever since the company retreat last spring, when we got paired for some forced team building exercise involving a blindfold and way too much trust, I'd started noticing him more. Or maybe I just stopped pretending not to. It started small. His laugh echoing down the hallway. The way he leaned back in his chair when he was thinking. That soft edge in his voice when he said my name, like he saw something in me I hadn't fully owned, yet tonight had been the company's summer party. Casual drinks, a rented rooftop bar. Laughter that got louder the later it got. I watched him the whole evening, drink in hand, tie loosened just enough, sleeves rolled. He moved through the crowd like he didn't owe anyone anything. But when his eyes met mine, something in them paused. A flicker. A quiet recognition. He didn't drink much, but he drank fast. And by the time the group started thinning out, he looked at me with glassy eyes and asked, "You're heading out too?" "Yeah," I said. "Need a ride?" He hesitated, then nodded. That'd be great. I could have let him take a cab. Could have handed him off to someone else. But I didn't. And as we stepped out into the warm night and the hum of the city settled around us, I realized something. I wanted to be the one who took care of him. Even if just for the night. He was unusually quiet during the drive. Leaning back in the passenger seat, shirt wrinkled, eyes half shut. "Thanks," he murmured. "Didn't expect to drink that much." "It's fine," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Happens to the best of us." He chuckled under his breath. "I usually don't let anyone see me like this." "You're lucky it's me, then." The words slipped out before I could catch them, casual on the surface, but loaded underneath. He didn't respond. Just turned his head slightly, and for a second I thought he was going to say something more. But he did, and single quote stayed now, standing in my living room, watching him sleep with his arm draped awkwardly across his chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, not just between us. In me, I grabbed a folded blanket from the hall closet and carefully draped it over him. My fingers paused at the edge of his collar, barely grazing the skin beneath. He stirred slightly but didn't wake. His brow furrowed the way it did when he was deep in thought. Or maybe dreaming. I lingered a little too long. Let myself really look at the man who had occupied far too many of my quiet thoughts. Lately, his jawline softened by sleep, the faint stubble catching the lamplight. His lips parted just enough to breathe. God, what was I doing? This wasn't a moment. It wasn't anything, but it felt like the beginning of something I hadn't dared to name. ***, I never planned to get close to him. That's the kind of thing you say about people you end up thinking about at 2 a.m. when sleep won't come. When I first joined the company, he barely noticed me. And I didn't expect him to. We lived in different worlds. He was the kind of guy who knew how to command a room without raising his voice. I was the quiet new hire, stuck behind spreadsheets and secondhand coffee mugs, always afraid to be too loud, too visible. But then came the spring retreat. We were randomly paired up for some ridiculous trust fall exercise. I remember standing behind him, arms crossed awkwardly, waiting for him to let himself fall backward. He'd looked over his shoulder at me and smirked. "Don't drop me," he said. "Depends on how heavy your ego is," I shot back. He laughed. Really laughed, and I remember thinking, oh no, he's going to be dangerous. After that, something shifted. He started showing up near my desk more often, asking questions he didn't really need answers to, joking around when no one else was listening. Our conversations always hovered in that liminal space between professional and personal, just friendly enough to pass, just warm enough to linger. At lunch, he'd sometimes wait to see if I was heading out too, and when I stayed late, he'd nod silently across the office, as if to say, "You're not the only one burning out." The first time I saw him relaxed outside the office was at a team dinner 6 months ago. He'd worn a navy shirt with the sleeves pushed up just enough to reveal a fading scar on his forearm. I asked him about it. He grinned and said, "You ask a lot of questions for someone who pretends not to care." And I stupidly, nervously replied, "Only when I'm curious." That was how it always was with him. Teasing remarks that felt like invitations to something deeper, but never quite crossed the line. Little inside jokes like how he hated the office air freshener and would dramatically fake a cough whenever he walked by it. Or how I'd always claim I didn't drink coffee, then steal sips from his cup when no one was watching. One night, we were both stuck late finishing a report for a senior client. The office was nearly empty, and the air was thick with that end-of-day silence that feels like confession. He rolled up his sleeves again and looked over at me with tired eyes. "You ever think about quitting all this?" he asked suddenly. I glanced at him. "Every Monday morning." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, same." That moment stayed with me longer than I cared to admit. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it, like he wanted someone to understand without needing to explain. That was when I realized I'd stopped seeing him as just my boss. He wasn't untouchable anymore. He was human, complex, sad sometimes, and beautiful in a way I was trying very hard not to notice. But the complication wasn't him. Not really. It was me. I'd been out since college. It wasn't a secret, but I never brought it up at work. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was tired of being reduced to it. I didn't want pity. I didn't want curiosity. I didn't want to become the story people told at happy hours when they'd had too much to drink, and he never said anything about himself, about who he loved. If there were signs, I missed them. Or maybe I just didn't want to see them. A few weeks ago, we'd been talking about weekend plans. He mentioned a friend he used to travel with, then quickly changed the subject. I let it go. But something about the way he swallowed his words, like they burned coming up, haunted me. Maybe he was like me. Maybe he was nothing like me. That unknowing was its own kind of intimacy. A secret we were both silently holding. One afternoon, I brought him coffee without asking. He blinked at me in surprise, then raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think you were the coffee-fetching type," he said, smirking. "I'm not, but I was feeling generous." He sipped, nodded in approval, then gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Dangerous thing being generous with someone like me. I tried to laugh it off, but my chest was already tight. "Good thing I like danger, then." He didn't say anything, just smiled again, that quiet, unreadable smile, and went back to typing. But his foot brushed mine under the table. It could have been an accident. It could have meant nothing, but he didn't move it, and neither did I. It was supposed to be a quick ride. Drop him off, maybe exchange a few words on the curb, and then head home like nothing had shifted between us at that rooftop party. But when we stepped out of the elevator into the underground garage, we were met with two words that changed everything. Flat tire. I stared at the back left wheel, now sunken and deflated like it had given up on the night too. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. "You've got to be kidding." "I wish I was," I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. "Spare's in my trunk, but it'll take time." "You okay to hang around a bit?" He glanced at his watch, then gave a small shrug. "Well, I'm not walking home in these shoes. Lead the way." So we went back up to my place. It wasn't the first time he'd been there, but the last time had been for a team Zoom call I hosted during lockdown. Back then, we'd sat on opposite ends of my living room, laptops open, coffee cups between us like walls. Now, he stood in the center of my studio apartment, swaying slightly, eyes scanning the books on my shelf, the half-folded laundry, the framed Polaroid on my nightstand that caught the sunset just right. "This feels more like you than the office does." he said quietly. I paused near the window, unsure how to respond. Yeah, I guess I can breathe more here. He turned toward me. You should let that side out more. His words felt heavier than they sounded. Maybe it was the way he said you, not as a joke, not as a challenge, but like it mattered. I busied myself in the kitchen, pretending the tea kettle needed urgent attention. You want anything? I asked, voice tight. Water? Tea? He smiled, slipping off his blazer and hanging it neatly over the back of a chair. Whatever you're having, I handed him a mug, fingers brushing his. Just skim, just a second. But it felt like something unspoken had passed between us, something neither of us wanted to name yet. We sat on the floor, leaning against the edge of my bed, because somehow that felt less formal than the couch. His tie was still loose, shirt slightly untucked, hair a little more disheveled than usual. And I couldn't stop noticing his knee bumped mine. He didn't move it, so, he said after a while, swirling his tea absent-mindedly. What's your deal, really? My deal, you... Outside of Excel sheets and bad office lighting. I laughed softly. That's a big question for 2 a.m. He smiled, but his gaze didn't drop. We've worked together for over a year. I know your favorite candy bar and the playlist you always put on when you're stressed. But I don't know what keeps you up at night. I swallowed hard. Maybe I don't want anyone to know. He tilted his head slightly. Even me? The question hung there between us, fragile, dangerous. I don't know, I said. Sometimes I think if someone really knew me, they'd leave. He didn't say anything, just looked at me for a long moment. Then he leaned in, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel his warmth. I wouldn't, he said. Quietly, my breath caught. I didn't know if he meant it the way I wanted him to. But I felt something break open in me, something I'd held back for far too long. Silence settled in again, but it wasn't empty. It was dense with everything we weren't saying. Outside, the city had gone quiet. No more traffic. Just the hum of the fridge and the sound of him shifting slightly beside me. Then came the moment that undid me, small, subtle, impossible to forget. He reached over to grab his mug, but his hand grazed mine in the process. He didn't flinch. Didn't apologize. Just let it rest there, his fingers on the back of mine for a second too long. I froze. My heart raced in my chest. Loud enough I was sure he could hear it. I didn't dare look at him. He moved his hand back slowly, his voice quieter now. Sorry. But he wasn't, and neither was I. I turned to him. His eyes were on the mug, but his jaw was tense, and his shoulders slightly hunched forward like he was bracing for something. Do you ever think we're pretending too well? I asked before I could stop myself. He looked up. Pretending. What? That this, whatever this is just normal. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at me like he was searching for a version of me he hadn't let himself acknowledge until now. Yeah. He finally said, all the time, that was it. No declaration. No dramatic music cue. Just honesty, laid bare in the space between our knees. I wanted to reach for him. God, I wanted to. But I was scared. Scared of what it would mean. Scared that if I touched him, it would all unravel, or worse, become real. He must have seen something. In my face, because he softened. I'm not good at this stuff, he admitted. Whatever it is we're doing? You mean sitting on my floor at 2 a.m. drinking peppermint tea? He laughed, his voice low and warm. Yeah, that. We didn't touch again that night. But when he stood up to leave hours later, after the tire was fixed and the world felt normal again, he paused by the door. I'll see you Monday, he said. Same meeting. Same chaos. Yeah, I replied. See you then. But as he turned, he looked back over his shoulder and said something I hadn't expected. Thanks for not letting me be alone tonight. And then he was gone. I tried to play it cool on Monday. Really, I did. Same walk through the lobby. Same nod to the receptionist. Same coffee run, same desk, same smile when he passed by, but nothing felt the same. Not after Saturday night. Not after he let his fingers rest on mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not after that look, half hesitation, half something deeper, when he said thank you before walking out my door, like We hadn't just danced on the edge of something dangerous. We didn't talk about it. Of course we didn't. The week passed in. Quiet chaos meetings, client calls, lunch breaks, filled with noise that made it easy to ignore the silence between us. But it was there, vibrating beneath every polite smile, every glance that lingered too long. By Friday, I was unraveling. That evening, the office emptied out early, most of the staff heading to a birthday dinner for one of the interns. I stayed behind, blaming a deadline that didn't exist. I needed the quiet. Or maybe I was hoping he'd come back through the hallway like he sometimes did when he forgot something. And, like some part of him had been thinking the same thing, he did. He stepped into the doorway just as I was gathering my bag. "Didn't think you were still here," he said, voice casual but not distant. I looked up, forcing a small smile. "Thought I'd wrap a few things before the weekend," he nodded. Me too, but he didn't move. Just stood there, one hand in his pocket, the other resting on the doorframe like he wasn't sure if he was coming in or trying to keep himself from doing so. "You all right?" I asked. He gave a small laugh. "You always ask me that." Because I never get a straight answer, his eyes lifted to mine. And this time, he didn't look away. "Neither do I," he said softly. Something in my chest pulled tight. I sat. My bag down. "Okay," I said, almost too quietly. "So let's stop pretending." He stepped inside the office, closing the door behind him. The soft click echoed like thunder in the silence. "I don't know what this is," he said, taking a slow step toward me. "I just know that I think about you, more than I should. And not in the way someone should think about a coworker." I didn't speak because I'd dreamed of this moment too many times to trust that it was real. He kept going, voice low but steady. "I've been trying to talk myself out of it for months, telling myself it's just admiration, or maybe projection, or maybe I'm just lonely. But none of that explains the way it felt sitting on your floor last weekend, not wanting to leave." I swallowed hard. "You weren't the only one who didn't want it to end." His shoulders relaxed slightly, like he'd been bracing for rejection and was only now letting air into his lungs. "Then why didn't you say anything?" he asked. I looked down at the floor, at the scuff marks near the edge of the desk. "Because I was afraid if I did, I'd lose what little I already had." He took a step closer. "And what do you think you have?" I looked up again, my heart pounding. "You, in pieces, in passing moments, in sideways glances and coffee breaks that last longer than they should." His expression shifted, softened into something I hadn't seen before, a mix of pain and wonder and something tender. "I don't want to be pieces," he whispered. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the AC kicking in. "Neither do I," I said. And then, slowly, like the air between us had thickened with all the things we hadn't said, he reached for me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. Just his hand, tentative and warm, resting on my shoulder, fingers curling just enough to make me feel like he was holding on to something he didn't want to lose. I stepped in, not all at once, but enough to close the gap. He looked at me, like he was memorizing my face, his thumb brushing just beneath my jaw. My skin buzzed under his touch, and I couldn't think straight. All I could do was feel every inch of space between us evaporating. "I've wanted to kiss you for a long time," he said, voice trembling slightly. "Then why haven't you?" His lips quirked. "Because I wanted it to matter." "It already does." And then, finally, he kissed me soft, careful, like he was afraid I'd disappear. I didn't. I kissed him back, and it was everything I hadn't let myself imagine. The warmth of his mouth against mine, the hand that slid behind my neck, the unspoken sigh between us like we'd both been holding our breath for months. When we pulled apart, neither of us moved away. His forehead rested against mine. "This changes everything," he said. I nodded. "Yeah? You okay with that?" I laughed under my breath. "I'm terrified." He smiled, his breath catching against my cheek. "Me too. But I don't want to keep pretending I don't care about you," I added, barely able to say the words. He looked into my eyes. And for the first time, I saw it all there, everything he hadn't said. "I care more than I should," he whispered. And just like that, something inside me finally settled, not resolved. Not finished, but safe. He held my hand as we sat down together on the office couch, legs brushing. We didn't say much after that, just quiet touches, long glances. A shared stillness that didn't need explaining, for the first time in months. Maybe years. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was just here with him, where I'd wanted to be all along. We didn't go back to work after that kiss. I mean, technically we stayed in the office, sat there on the couch in the corner of the conference room, like nothing existed beyond those walls, but nothing about it felt like work anymore. Something had cracked open between us, and for once, we weren't trying to close it. He leaned back, one arm stretched along the couch behind me, fingers just barely brushing my shoulder. I stayed close, not touching him fully, but not pulling away either. It felt new, fragile, like the hush after the storm. So, he said eventually, glancing sideways at me, should we start planning our exit strategy? I smiled. You mean for this situation? No, for the company softball team, he deadpanned. Then, softer, yeah, for this. I let the silence settle before answering. I don't want to run from it. His fingers traced the seam of the couch cushion. Neither do I. There was something gentle in the way he looked at me now, no tension in his brow, no mask of professionalism. Just a man figuring out what to do with the feelings he'd spent too long hiding. I don't think we have to blow up our lives overnight, I said. We can take it slow, be smart, he chuckled. You always say that when you're trying to keep me from doing something reckless. It's part of my charm. He reached over and nudged my knee with his. So you're saying this is real? I've wanted it to be for a long time. A beat passed. Then he reached for my hand openly, deliberately, and linked our fingers. It was such a simple thing, but it knocked the air out of me. His palm was warm, steady. There was no uncertainty now in the way he touched me, no hesitation. Just, quiet, undeniable, yes. You know, he said, I've been watching you steal my coffee for months. I laughed, caught off guard. Well, maybe if you ordered something drinkable? Uh-huh. You could have just said you liked me. I turned to face him, eyebrow raised. And ruin my reputation as the emotionally unavailable office mystery? He smiled. You're the least mysterious person I've ever met. That's rude. It's true, he teased. You blush every time someone compliments your work. You hum when you're focused. And you always try to act unimpressed. When I walk into the room, I stared at him. Okay, maybe you are observant. He shrugged, then looked down at our joined hands. I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to do this, he said quietly. Let someone in like this, my voice softened. Me either. His thumb brushed the inside of my wrist. Guess we're both getting brave. We sat like that for a while, talking about nothing and everything, weekend plans. Favorite childhood? Snacks. The way the office would probably explode if anyone found out. Not because of scandal, but because no one would believe it. Can you imagine the gossip? I said, Oh, it would be brutal, he replied. They'd call you the boss whisperer. Not the worst nickname I've had. He squeezed my hand. Again, still, we'll have to be careful. I don't want to be the reason anything goes wrong for you. You're not, I said quickly. You're not something wrong, you're just, finally, something right. That stopped him. His eyes met mine, and for a moment neither of us smiled. It wasn't a joke anymore. It wasn't something to tease. It was real. He leaned in again, not for a kiss this time, but to rest his head lightly on my shoulder, and I let him, the weight of him there, the way his breathing slowed to match mine, it anchored me. Told me that no matter how complicated this might get, we were in it together now. I don't know where this goes, he said quietly. I rested my cheek against the top of his head. Then let's figure it out. A long breath passed between. U.S., starting with dinner, he added, because I'm starving. I laughed. You want to go to dinner now? After dropping all that emotional vulnerability on the table? You've seen me cry into tea. There's no coming back from that. Might as well go all in. Okay, but I picked the place. He grinned. As long as there's food and you keep looking at me like that, I'll go anywhere. I didn't realize I'd been looking at him that way. But I didn't stop, ***, we didn't tell anyone at work. Not right away. It wasn't about shame, it was about keeping something that finally felt ours, untouched by whispers or speculation or overanalyzed. Glances in the break room. For the first time in a long time, we didn't owe anyone an explanation. We found our rhythm quietly. Lunches that lasted longer. Texts that used to end in "see you Monday" now turned into "drive safe" or "call me later." Meetings, where I used to feel invisible, now held a quiet comfort because I knew. In the corner of the room, he saw me. Really saw me. We still kept our distance in public spaces. Professional, polite, but in private. Everything shifted. Sometimes he'd come over after work, no plans, no agenda. He'd toss his keys on my table, loosen his tie, and fall onto my couch like it belonged to both of us now. I'd bring him tea not because I had to, but because he liked the way I made it, even though it was the same brand he had at home. One night, a week or so after everything changed, he brought over a book. "I figured you'd like this," he said, handing it to me like it wasn't a big deal. It was dog-eared, well-loved. An old paperback with his name in the front cover. I turned it over in my hands, heart squeezing tighter than I expected. "Thanks," I said. "I'll read it slowly. Make it last." "That's what I did," he replied, sitting beside me and watching my face more than the book. "We didn't kiss right away. Not that night. We just sat close, shoulders brushing. The book between us like a promise. That small gesture stuck with me, the idea that he wanted to share something that had meant something to him. It wasn't flowers or dinner or grand declarations. It was something quieter, more honest. And then, this morning, everything felt different again. We had a team-wide strategy session. Big room, bright lights, too many people. But halfway through, I caught his gaze from across the table. Just a glance. Just a flicker, and he smiled, not the professional one, not the polite one. The real one. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, he offered to walk me to my car. Nothing new, he'd done it before. But tonight, there was something in the way his hand brushed mine on the stairwell rail. A silent question. So I stopped, right there, between floors, in a quiet slice of the building where no one ever lingered. He turned, confused. "What is it?" I looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't filter myself. "I want to try," I said. For real, not just stolen moments. Not just silence and maybes. His face softened. "Me too," he said. "I've wanted to say that for weeks." I stepped closer, and this time I didn't wait for him to make the first move. I reached for his hand fully, openly. Not a brush, not a flicker, but a real grip, solid, certain. He looked down at our hands, then back at me. "You sure?" I nodded. "I don't want to keep loving you in half measures." That word love hung between us. Not loud, not shouted, but true. He didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled my hand up and pressed a kiss to the back of it. A quiet promise. "I'm in this with you," he whispered. "Wherever it goes." We stayed there for a long moment, the hallway washed in amber light, not rushing, not worrying. Just beginning, because that's what this was. Not a conclusion, not a neat ending, but a doorway, opening into something new.